Our protagonists were labeled as Fist King for being the man who subjugated the Jianghu with his bare fists alone. At this era, he is the man who is called by this title more than his own name. This is Dan Wuzing, also known as Fist King. In the current timeline, he was ambushed by a mysterious bunch, but with his fierce strength they weren't able to fight back. But there's another problem. He still need to fight these two remaining enemies. Dan knew they are skilled by only looking at them. Dan wasn't fazed. He threw a dead body to their location. Even though his subordinates seek help, he didn't hesitate to cut his ally. This surprised Dan. Even though this was his ally, he showed no remorse. So Dan understand that this guy would fight dirty. By looking at the man's sword symbol and the cruelty, Dan knew they came from the demonic faction. As the man complimenting Dan's impressive skill that suits to his title, Dan told him to shut up. He wasn't impressed and swore he's going to kill him in just 10 attacks. But the man found this arrogant. He swung his sword, hurtling a sequence of slashes. Dan, unfazed, dodged all of his attack and charges at him. He landed a powerful blow that surprises the man. He caught off guard by the speed of Dan, however. Dan starts to count. The second punch landed. He continued, reaching the sixth count. As Dan keeps on going, he noticed his attacking getting strange, as he missing all the man's weakest spots, like someone were restraining him. Dan realized that the woman with the man had been restraining his actions to stop him from hitting a crucial spots. Dan wondered when this happened. All of a sudden, the man grabs his sword, piercing Dan's chest. Dan left speechless as he let his guard down. The man mocked him, telling this is the reign for the Fist King. However, his eyes widened, because Dan snaps the link. He knew he's in a bad situation, but it was too late for him to react. As the smoke fade, he only received a small scratch on his face. It turns out that Dan doesn't make it. He missed his attack as he died. The girl teases him for making himself open like that, so the man understand and thanked her for helping him out. The man goes to his body, poking his head and mocking Dan if he just going to die like this. Just as sudden, Dan gave him a powerful punch. This punch was the 10th punch. Unfortunately, this wasn't enough as his strength leaving his body, and this is the end of his life as the Fist King. Because Dan had been slowly losing his life, but before dying, he wished he could have hit him one more time. Meanwhile, at the Jihua Mountain safe house, inside, a man was peacefully sleeping. As he opened his eyes, he wondered where he was, and a girl asked him if he was okay. This man wondering if someone just treated him. His head is full of confusion. According to this man, he don't have any injuries. Therefore, the woman asked him if he needs some water, which he agreed, but in his thought, he asked himself if she just called him first young master. When he looked at the mirror, his face turns pale after realizing the situation. The water from his mouth burst that startled the woman beside him. Who put a mask over my face? There's no line where the mask usually ends. This isn't a mask, confusingly said to himself. Because of what he was doing, the woman decided to get the physician. This man slaps his face to wake himself, thinking this is only a dream. While the woman hearing those slaps, she got weirded out by the first young master's behavior. It turns out this man is Dan, but he were in different body. He remembered the time he had been loose from the demonic faction. He assumed they were the one behind this, and they would have already taken control over Jianghu. But he wondered who is the owner of the body he was using right now. Therefore, he had no other choice but to find the truth. When he tried to walk, he couldn't and felt like a fawn. He was disappointed that the body he was using right now is absolute garbage. On the desk, there's a book labeled as Yunhe Merchant Group. This is familiar to him, as this was one of the large merchant groups situated near Jihua Mountain. Reading the further details, he was shocked by the receiver's name. It was named over the owner of his body, the eldest son Li Jinian. Inside the letter, it was addressed to him like money, gambling, and women. Frustration eats him over, since this is all he could get from the letters. Therefore, he realized this alter reality is reincarnation after having a strange feeling within his body. All of a sudden, someone was screaming, calling his name. It was Gongsun Miyoung, Li Jinian's physician, and he was worried with his condition. His face disgusted, wondering who this man was. Gongsun Miyoung revealed that he was worried after hearing there's something was off with him, so he rushed to check him immediately. Gongsun Miyoung held his hand, but Dan tried to calm him by saying he was all right and nothing has to worry. Gongsun Miyoung was glad to hear it. Then he called the assistants to prepare the meal he have made for him. He prepared a chicken soup that going to invigorating Dan's body. But Dan can't be fooled. He knew this chicken soup dish called the Dragon and Phoenix soup that great for those who are healthy, but with this sick state of the owner's body, this is equivalent to a poison. He also noticed Gongsun Miyoung stealthy take his pulse when he grabs his hand, so Dan knew Gongsun Myung thought it was weird for him to look healthy. So Dan knew this man is like a snake, therefore, Gongsun Myung advises him to eat this regularly to become healthy as the youths that attend the Dragon Phoenix martial competition. Dan tried to change the topic by asking him if how many years has the Dragon Phoenix martial competition gone on for now. Gongsun Myung replied he wasn't sure, but he believed it's been about 200 years. After hearing it, he refused to it as he loses appetite and advised him to leave the soup at the table. Gongsun Myung keeps insisting, but Dan doesn't want to get disturbed as he wants to sleep again. After closing the door, he was a bit disappointed that it is almost the time for the 200th Dragon Phoenix martial competition. But still, he was glad it hasn't been long since he died. So he thinks the demon faction should still be alive. Also, there's a snake-like physician. That means, in this life, he's still surrounded by people who need a beating. Dan swore to himself he's going to kill them with just one punch this time. After a few days, the maids prepared him with such meal. They are surprised he's eating this much again, as he used to only eat porridge, but this time, his appetite came back like a fully healthy man again. Dan finally finished taking a bath. Dan was a bit surprised they already finished preparing breakfast, so Dan was excited of what they made for him. He also advised them to keep his breakfast simple as this from now on. The maids noticed his changes. His body seems gotten healthier than before. While Dan was peacefully eating his food, Gongsun Myung disturbed him again, asking if he could come inside, so he lets him. We can see to his face he's frustrated by Dan's recovery and doesn't even apologize after bumping one of the maids. Dan noticed this rudeness upon him. All of a sudden, his mood suddenly changed after seeing Dan. Dan wasn't impressed because he knew this interaction with him is fake, so he's planning to catch this little rat. He asked Gongsun Myung if what he need. Gongsun Myung wants to show his empathy by his sick condition, but he noticed his complexion looks so different now. Gongsun Myung shows his disappointment for the efforts he put in became meaningless. Effort, Dan asked with a cold tone. He confronted Gongsun Myung for seducing him with Dragon Phoenix soup. This made Gongsun Myung shocked after realizing Dan already knew about the purpose of the Dragon Phoenix soup. Gongsun Myung tried to save himself by telling it might be a misunderstanding because the Dragon Phoenix soup is a nourishing tonic. But Dan sarcastically told him, "Oh really? I thought it was poison." Gongsun Myung tried to remind him he was his personal physician and wouldn't do that such thing to him. Therefore, Gongsun Myung decided to leave his position since it seems Dan doesn't need him anymore. Dan called him before leaving. He frankly asked Gongsun Myung if he's the master here, as he just came without being called for, and now deciding on himself to leave without being told. This scares the shit out of him. Then Dan tried to calm him by telling it's only a joke. He told that he need to send a letter, so he ordered Gongsun Myung to bring him the writing tools from his desk. He wants Gongsun Myung to write what he dictate. Due to Li Jinion's severe illness, I must remain in the villa for some time. I must remain in the villa for some time, since this life of mine is so stubbornly long. Please advise on what I should do next. Hearing this made Gongsun Myung stopped on writing. Dan confronted him from not writing down what he was dictating. Gongsun Myung tried to acting dumb, asking what he was talking. But before finishing his words, Dan throwed him a chopstick that almost hit him. Although it's only a mere chopstick, it pierced through a concrete. However, it still scratches him. Dan reminds him that he is not the Lee Gongsun Myung of the past anymore. Still, Gongsun Myung acting dumb. So in order for him to understand, he begin with the Dragon Phoenix soup he always prepare for him. He explained that this food is tonic to healthy people, but for someone as ill as him, it is good as poison. Since he's a physician, he must know that important thing. Also, he reminded him the time Gongsun Myung thought he wouldn't notice him checking his pulse secretly when he didn't die. And lastly, when Dan told him to leave the food he prepared and everyone has to get out, he knew by look at his face, he couldn't even hide his intentions to kill him. However, Dan knew he's not acting alone, so he ordered him to write down the name of the one who gave him orders in this letter. Gongsun Myung replied, "Why are you doing this, sir? How could you suspect such a kind man like me? Even a scoundrel like you has a conscience, huh?" he said with a cold tone. Dan was glad that he finally show his true colors. Gongsun Myung tell that truth that he was trying to let him pass with dignity. But since he was caught, he was planning of killing them all, even the servants, to silence them. As Gongsun Myung about to pull a sharp object from his neck, Dan already in front of him, giving him a karate chop to his head. He told him not to get distracted while he was talking. However, the pain from that karate chop is so painful, so he need to recover his strength quickly. Once he do that, he won't hesitate to confront the mastermind behind this controversy. Also, when he returned to the group, he will have to investigate Gongsun Myung. All of a sudden, he got stumbled. His head suddenly hit a sharp pain from a headache. Then he heard voices through his head. From the past, when Gongsun Myung were talking to him, He saw the owner of his body talking to Gongsun Myung, so he think this is the memories of the owner of his body. Tears drop into his eyes, wondering what is this. In the past, Lee Ji-neon was the first son of the wealthy Yunhe merchant group. He was neither as smart as his second brother, nor as strong as his third brother. That means he is just a lacking eldest son. He tried to compensate for his shortcomings with money, but ended up indulging in a depraved life of pleasure. By the time he realized his mistakes and turned back, it was already too late. Having neglected his health, he was sent to Villa. So knowing this past memories, he knew this clan wouldn't care about this place of exile. Dan's first problem was being reincarnated without the owner's body memories. But he is now sure he can finally focus on martial arts now. But to think he would waste such an innately gifted body, with his past life's knowledge and a few rare elixirs, he could reach a high level in no time. However, Dan suddenly remember an important thing. He is rich in this life. All he have is money, and there's nothing he can't afford, so elixirs will be easy to get for him. He also remember Gongsun Myung dead in the table, so he must bury him immediately. 1 year later, a man came in. This man is Mok Inseop, a Yunhe merchant group's guard squad, and he was looking for Dan since he have letter for him. When the maid told him where he was, his eyes widened of what he sees right now. He thought he was mistaken him because he looks so different now. Because right now, Dan's body was so buffed unlike before. A few seasons have gone by. Dan's energy core manifested, and he engraved all the martial arts required for survival onto his body. To name them, the Enlightened Mobility Art, the Enlightened Body Art, the Rapid Stride, and an art that allows him to control lightning, the White Lightning 10-phase art. So far I've reached the 4th phase. Everything has gone smoothly to Dan. However, even though he's strong at this state, still, this isn't enough. Later on, Mok arrived. He told that he brought a letter from the main clan. Dan wants to see it. Inside Mok's thought, he wonder if this is really the young master Ji-neon he knew. Inside the letter, it stated Dan's father has collapsed and is now bedridden. But he is confused since there's no explanation why his father fell ill. Mok assumes this might be caused by the Ouyang clan. He revealed how their group has been paying tributes under the pretext of protection fees, and those payments snowballed and have now become unbearable. But Dan wonder if the Ouyang clan done anything to deserve raising those fees. For Mok, they deserve nothing at all, and called them dog. He revealed that even when the little deity sect tried to impose ridiculous trade taxes recently, he added that the Ouyang clan simply said, "We only meet with the main clan of the Yunhe merchant group if there's a serious issue." After that, they did nothing at all. Lastly, their guard captain couldn't even protest because they were talking about Ouyang Hu. Dan heard of him for being well known in the Jianghu. He's strong enough for someone like Dan to know of him. So Dan think merchant groups like theirs are beneath this guy. Then he proposed an idea of having a deal with the Ouyang clan to resolve everything. In Mok's thought, he think dealing with them is a bad idea. Therefore, he revealed the another crucial reason behind his father's collapse. He told that there was a sword fight between the 2nd and 3rd young masters, and after he bore witness to them, he collapsed. Dan understand that their father collapsed due to anger, and this happened all the time. He can't believe they got into a fight in front of the merchant group leader, and not an ordinary fight, as swords included, but Mok think this isn't important since they don't do hard to Dan. But for Dan, he doesn't want to sit back and watch this problem ongoing. Mok were confused of what he meant. As Dan stood up, he told him he can keep the letter, because he decided to go by himself. As Mok came back, he told to everyone that Lee Ji-neon that they knew had completely changed. He's trying to convince everyone that Lee Ji-neon had become a perfect martial artist, and his body incredibly changed. But everyone just laughs at him, thinking it was impossible to happen. They mock him, calling names like being a master of bedroom technique, and this made Mok speechless. This man told him to at least make an effort on making jokes like this, because for them, it was more believable if their vice captain has a lover. Little did he not know, their vice captain heard it. This is Han Yip, the Yunhe Merchant Group Guard Squad's vice captain. Hearing that news makes Han interested since he knew Ji-neon had a fine physique ever since he was a child. The man asked him if he know when Ji-neon planning to return, but Mok wasn't sure since he only said he's going to come by himself. After a few moments, someone declared that young Master Ji-neon has arrived. Therefore, they decided to meet and greet Ji-neon. Upon Dan's arrival, he was amazed by the current structure of their village. He is surprised their merchant group are already in this scale. 2 young made approaches to help him, but he advised them to 2 ahead and rest well as he only going to see his father immediately. But upon his observation, he wondered why isn't a single person welcoming him. He suddenly heard sword-clashing noise. When he turned around, a group of guards greeted his arrival, congratulating him for his safe return. Han Yun introduced himself as the squad's vice captain. He complimented Dan's changes that he became almost unrecognizable. While they were talking, the man earlier wondered if their vice captain have no pride, because a long time ago, the Li Jineon they know always looked down on him. So he think he might get mocked again by Li Jineon. But thing got surprisingly changed as Dan showed respect for their kindness and enthusiastic. Their faces were full of disbelief after seeing this. They were so shocked as he greeted them for the first time. Just like Mock said, he really changed, and they start to believe him. Also for Han, he seems happy to see Li Jineon like this, because for the first time, they feel like he's their ally and not their enemy. Later on, Han notify him that he already informed their father that he's visiting. Just as sudden, a man came up. This man seems to know Li Jineon. He taps his shoulder, and it turns out this man is Li Jiayan, the Yunhe merchant group's third son. He also noticed Dan's expression looked like a completely different person. He could even glare now. Han thought Dan would get smacked again just like before. Han immediately removed his hand from Dan's shoulder to escalate the tense situation, since this is their reunion after a long time. Li Jiayan snaps his face for touching his body without his permission. This made Dan speechless. Li Jiayan think Han looks down on him now for dealing with their own issue. When Dan heard Li Jiayan wants to teach him a lesson, he taps his brother's face. Then he suddenly punched him so hard. Li Jiayan caught off guard by his powerful punch. Even Han left speechless. Li Jiayan full of surprises of what he just did. Moreover, Dan told that he was excited on his way here. But as he grabs Li Jiayan's shoulder, his grip are so hard, making him feel an excruciating pain. He bear the pain while calling Dan an insane bastard. Inside bastard? You should be calling me big brother, he said to Li Jiayan. A few moments passed by. A man saw the guards gossiping in front of his father's room. This is Li Huayan, the Yunhe merchant group's second son. Therefore, he asked Han what's with the ruckus, so Han explained that they heard the first and third young masters had argument. Li Huayan think Li Jiayan must have harassing Li Jineon again. So he's confused of what are they doing, so he ordered to stop them. But as he entered, Dan told him to be quiet since they were in front of their father's room. However, he recognized him immediately. Li Huayan got speechless of what he witnessed. Afterwards, they sit for a while. Li Huayan told that he heard the news about him returning. He also noticed his condition looks good. So Dan agreed since he's fine now. However, he noticed Li Huayan's hand and asked if Li Jiayan did this to him. Since he wasn't answering, Dan wants to punish him again. Even though he begs, Dan brutally beats him from his arrogance. Inside his thought, he can't even believe Li Jineon just beats him. He's confused how he's suddenly become like this, as he used to be so weak. Also, Li Huayan noticed his changes. Unlike before, Li Jiayan always beats him. Li Huayan asked him there's something happened at the safe house, because he seemed like a completely different person. So Dan replied, is that so? You've got a good eye. As he about to sit, he noticed the pile of scroll on the table. Li Huayan explained that this scroll is list of employees he need to take to the conference tomorrow. Upon observing, he saw Gongsun Myung's name on the list. So he came up with an idea of looking for the person who recommended Gongsun Myung. But upon digging further information, he saw Ouyang's name on the list. Therefore, he asked Huayan and Jiayan if any of them are working with the Ouyang clan. They must tell it to him. This surprised both of them, because they think this is ridiculous to happen. Jiayan even swore to his life that he would rather die than see some other clan member take over their business. Hearing it made Dan glad. He asked further if all higher-ups going to be attending the conference tomorrow, which Huayan agreed. Since this was the case, he decided to attend it too. Dan immediately leaves the room to see their father. Because of his sudden change, they wonder if what just happened at the safe house to make him act like this. Meanwhile, Jiayan regret his decision on not going to the Jihua mountain. Later on, Dan finally entered his father's room. This is Li Xiangmin, Yunhe merchant group's leader, and he was glad that his eldest son arrived. But the thing he asked first is the noise from the outside, and Dan replied it was nothing. Dan came since he heard his father not doing well because of the stress, so his father explained to him that he have always been under stress, but since he's old, he can't really handle this stress anymore. Out of nowhere, he grabs his face, noticing his change. Even his face looks different to him, so he wonder if he really Li Jineon. But still he was glad his son doing well. Suddenly, Dan felt a strange feeling. In his past life, he grew up without parents, so he don't know what having a father is like. But in Li Jineon memories, his father was a really great and big person. So he wonder when did his father get this small. Dan comforted his father by telling they just need to eliminate the cause of his stress. He promised he will eliminate it all, and as his father heard it, he wondered what he meant. With a wicked smile, he told it's nothing so he must not worry, but with his smile, his father felt he's into something. The next day, the Yunhe Merchant Group conference had began. One of these people is Ouyang Hu, the Yunhe Merchant Group's guard squad leader, also known as Ouyang CLA's martial master. His underling noticed Li Jian sitting inside the conference room. They wonder of what is he doing here. Ouyang think he might worried about his position in the group, that why he force himself to come. As Waiyan is the conference going, Ouyang interrupted to give his concern. He told that he heard the news of Li Jian still having no guard despite coming back, so he wants to recommend someone. One of them gossiping about his arrogance, because he keeps recommending people from their clan. All of a sudden, this man's cap got hit by a sheer force. Both of them got startled. It turns out this was made by Ouyang as he hate people opposing his decision. As they continue, Ouyang asked if there's anyone wants to say something regards his suggestion, and since they are scared, they didn't let a single word. Since no one wants to complain, Ouyang wants to continue, but Dan raised his hand, because he have a complaints to say. While coming closer, he declare his suggestion. And that suggestion is the fire the guard squad leader Ouyang Hu. This shocks everyone but for the Ouyang clan, they think he lose his mind. So Ouyang's clan members burst into laughter. You want to fire me? You must have forgotten because you've been bedridden for so long, but that's not something you have say over, he mockingly replied to Dan. All of a sudden, Dan raises his fist. Then he strikes the floor with his sheer strength. This surprised Ouyang as the ground around him collapsed. His eyes is full of disbelief, knowing he already regained his strength and he's different from before. Dan declared to everyone that the Yunhe Merchant Group belongs to himself. Earlier, Waiyan and Jinian was discussing about dismissing Ouyang from his position. That's why he's going to attend the General Assembly, but Waiyan was scared to do this since they are just merchant group and messing with them would be a total mess. Dan turned around, asking him if he know what happens when a martial artist of the Jianghu got underestimated. He said that the one making such an assumption gets devoured. So he makes him to check the current state of the Yunhe Merchant Group, reminding him that they have been devoured already. Waiyan realized he was right, as most of their members are already from Ouyang clan. Since this was the case, Li Jian wants to stood up as an older brother to handle such thing. But Waiyan didn't expect that handle he said would turn like this. Because of what he did, all the guards from Ouyang clan got high alerted, asking him what is the meaning of his madness. Inside Ouyang's thought, he think he has gone mad. The Jianghu guards also gone mad for daring them to draw their sword against Jinian. They moved forward to protect him immediately. Dan declared to Ouyang, "You're right. That was truly insolent. Drawing a sword against your employer. You little punks really have a death wish. Well, since I do feel a little bad toward the guard captain, maybe I'll count this as compensation for ruining your retirement plans." He revealed that he used physician Gongsun Myung to assassinate him when he left to recuperate. Then he instigated a clash between his second and third brothers. When there's a bad blood between siblings, everything becomes much easier. Because of that, his father collapsed. Then he swayed one of the sons. By doing that, he could have taken over the Yunhe Merchant Group without lifting a finger. Ouyang make fun of his allegations, even calling him a delusional. However, Dan declared that the guy who's supposed to kill him died by his own hands, and this man is Gongsun Myung. So that means Ouyang's fate had changed. When Ouyang heard it, he can't believe of what he was saying right now, and Dan demonstrate how he sent him a single strike. Dan mocked him for not trying so hard to work hard to devour their major merchant group. He also wants to file claims for the damages he caused. This made Ouyang frustrated for his arrogance. But for Dan, he falls from his trap. Ouyang charges with killing intent. Dan acted swiftly and counteracted his attack. The room filled with intense force. Ouyang was surprised he had lightning energy, shocking him the reality he already learned martial arts. Also, the Ouyang guards were shocked to witness Li Jian blocked their captain's strike. He teased Ouyang, asking him if is it even okay for him to strike him who just finished recuperating, in other terms, just recovered from illness. Since this was the case, he think that strike is a proposal for official duel. Ouyang got even more frustrated for Li Jian's cockiness for thinking high of himself. Therefore, Ouyang announced that they are going to proceed with an official duel between Li Jian against Ouyang. However, Dan wants to have a life or death duel together. Ouyang prepare himself while stating Dan's impressive growth in a short time, achieving a quite decent skill, but for him this short term of experience will show their difference. Ouyang charges at him without hesitation. Dan easily dodges his attack. Ouyang was startled, he just evaded his attack. But little he didn't know, Dan already charges his fist. Dan punches him with full force, throwing him so hard. Ouyang were shocked with his strength. Dan declared he's going to show him what true difference in experience looks like. He exiled his new art, enlightened mobility art, making him move in high speed with an ease. Dan keeps striking Ouyang over, and over while he was trying to avoid every single attack he's doing. While Ouyang taking those attack, he feels like something wrong with Li Jineon. He feels like he's fighting a seasoned martial master. Therefore, he wants to finish their fight immediately, and he pulled his trump card. When the Ouyang guards saw this, they were excited to see Li Jineon to lose. Ouyang used his three-forward sword art, but it was too late as Dan already slipped beneath him, using his rapid stride. Ouyang were caught off guard by his speed. Dan declared this is the farewell for him. He landed his strike under his chin, and by the force of his attack, he was able to throw him up. This made everyone left speechless. Even his father on the bed saw this happen. His assistant wonder what's happening at the conference room. Dan's father think Li Jineon appears to have learned martial arts. The guards immediately goes to their captain's body. Dan saw them frustrated, asking them if they want him to kill them too. A man saw their duel had no irregularities, so he wants to testify to that. However, he declared that from now on, if the Ouyang clan continues to demand revenge through duels, the Yunhee merchant group will have no way to avoid those. Dan understood of what they meant, since he never hoped to be free from grudges. But he reminded them that he's going to repay kindness if they show kindness, but if they show a grudge, he would also do the same. Also, he take responsibility the issue with this incident. Waiyan think this is too dangerous to do. Even though this was the case, Dan still wants to take responsibility since the Yunhee merchant group is owned by him. But also his father also belongs to the guard squad who welcomed back a discarded young master early in the morning, and it belonged to the stable hands who feel joy just watching him to eat. So Dan declared to Ouyang clan they had no intention of being toyed with scum like him. So if they don't understand of what he meant, he advised them to get lost as they are all fired. Their clan was glad to hear about this. But on the other side, they were frustrated their plans had failed. Therefore, they leave the place with despair. Everyone raises their respect to Dan after doing this. Even Mok can't control his emotion as he's so touched of what he did. The other guards think it's not good to celebrate, yet since they felt ashamed for just standing by and watching, Dan called his brother. He asked him if he could buy him some elixir. He thinks he deserved this since he's going to take responsibility of their clan, and this is a little support for him. Waiyan agreed and promised he's going to prepare him the best quality tonic. Dan also remember about the guard squad. On the other side, there was a group of men expecting Li Jineon to come. They wonder if how much he would spend for them at this moment. A few days ago, on the first day of Li Jineon's entry into the Yunhee merchant group, while they were peacefully roaming, Dan came something into his mind. He asked Han if he had eaten. Han said no since he has been working since dawn. Dan's expression suddenly changed because unlike Han, some people are eating during working hours unlike Han, who doesn't even have time to eat because of work. This frustrates Dan as they have easy living with others' money, so he wants to eliminate them all out. But the problem is if he removed them all, he needs someone to fill their place. However, the people he wanted to fill this job had finally come. He goes to the inn. People's attention goes to him. They noticed him coming at this place again since the old Li Jineon used to be in this place. They wonder what the Yunhee merchant group's young master is doing at this place again. Even though these people make fun of him, he holds his composure on not to make a scene. They thought Dan would waste all his money for pleasure in this kind of place again. Meanwhile, a fat guy were guarding a forbidden place. He noticed Dan coming, so he immediately greeted him, asking if he's going to make another generous donation. But Dan just told not to touch him because he might get a pig grease from him, and he ordered this fat guy to open the door. This insulted the fat guy, wondering why he act like this. Upon entering, there's 3 men waiting for his arrival. The man that seems the leader was glad he had finally come. This is Chul Myungo, also known as Poisonous Fox. He also noticed Dan's changes after having recuperation. Also the twin were glad to see him again, and this is Yuk Jinbo and Yuk Myungbo. Chul Myungo scolded the twins for not showing their concerns to Dan after getting well. They apologized because they didn't know, so Chul Myungo asked them to do it now. But calling him a friend by Chul Myungo is a joke for him because they have known each other since childhood. But that friendship included one-sided violence and financial exploitation. Dan realized the word friend in their relationship is just joke for Chul Myungo. He offers Dan to have some fun, assuming he's itching for some action because of spending much time recuperating. But in reality, Chul Myungo is the one who's itching for the money of Dan. However, Chul Myungo had been quiet ever since Dan entered, and this pisses him off. Dan said he was and Chul Myungo wonder what he's thinking. Inside Dan's thought, he was thinking if he should kill him or not. But killing wouldn't be worth it, since he's aiming for the twin brothers, who do all the chores for him. So Dan think they are doing thug jobs because of Chul Myungo. That means they are too valuable to rot under Chul Myungo. Dan declared he finally decided. With kind gesture, he asked Chul Myungo to hand him the vault key. They were speechless after hearing it. Chul Myung-go thinks he was asking this without sense, assuming he needed money. Dan confirms he did, and he only takes cash. He revealed that he was forced to invest in gambling den. Also, he told he must extort money and his medical bills from getting beaten by Chul Myung-go. Dan declared that damage would be worth at least 100,000. Chul Myung-go was confused, but he suddenly laughed. As he burst into laughter, he thinks Dan studied arithmetics during his recovery. Chul Myung-go called him a bastard. He added, "Do you think that vault only has 100,000 niang? It also contains jewelry, gold and silver. But there's nothing in there for you." So he confronted Dan if he need money. Why would he ask for the vault key? And he also pissed by Dan for ignoring him all the time. Chul Myung-go, why he sudden act like this? He think Dan forget who he was, so he reminded him once again of who he was. Chul Myung-go had enough, asking Dan if what's wrong with him and if he's asking for a death wish. Therefore, Chul Myung-go asked the brothers to beat him since he doesn't want to talk properly with him. As they grabbed Dan, Yuk Jinbo startled his strength. He told that he still get in trouble, even he showed kindness. Dan grabs Yuk Jinbo, then throws it toward Chul Myung-go. Luckily, they avoided, but he collided to the vault. Yuk Myung-bo immediately followed up with a strike, but Dan easily found his opening. Maneuvering himself from below, he managed to break Yuk Myung-bo's leg. This hits him so hard, making him fall to the ground. Dan looked back. He was surprised, because despite how much damage they took, they are still able to stand up. Despite having shattered wrist and ankles, there's not a single hint of fear in their eyes. Dan realized they are the real deal here. The twin immediately attack him like meatheads. But for Dan, they are too slow. He suddenly vanished to thin air, making the siblings wonder where he goes. It turns out that Dan is already right behind them. He grabs their head, while telling the two of them are too valuable to rot away. So he smashed their heads together. This way, he could put them unconscious to make them stay put. Since he's done with the siblings, there's only one left. Chul Myung-go can't believe of what he just witnessed. So Dan asked him what would happen next.